August 2011, Lancaster, California. 22-year-old Emma Coronel Ispuro walks into Antelope Valley Hospital about to give birth to twin daughters. Not unusual, except for one detail. Her husband is Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the most wanted drug trafficker on the planet, controlling billions in cartel money from hideouts across Mexico. And Emma just made sure their daughters would be born American citizens on U.S. soil, setting up an escape plan nobody saw coming. Fast forward to 2026. Those twin girls are teenagers living somewhere in the United States. Their father's locked in a Colorado supermax for life. Their mother served federal prison time and got released. Their half-brothers are running what's left of the Sinaloa cartel from Mexico, facing indictments and assassination attempts daily. The Guzman empire that once controlled entire regions of Mexico has been shattered and the family scattered across two countries. This is the story of how El Chapo's bloodline went from untouchable cartel royalty in Mexico to living and hiding across the U.S. border. How a drug lord's family escaped the violence, the government crackdowns, and the rival cartels that wanted them dead. Why American soil became their only safe haven, and whether they're still living off billions in hidden cartel money or just surviving on the ashes of a fallen empire. Let me break down how the most powerful narco family in modern history ended up running for their lives. Let's rewind to where this whole story starts. The mountains of Sinaloa, Mexico, a place that's produced more drug lords than any region on earth. Joaquin Archibaldo Guzman Loera was born April 4, 1957, in La Tuna, Badiraguato, one of the poorest, most isolated towns in Sinaloa. We're talking dirt floors, no running water, no electricity. His father grew opium poppies and marijuana to survive because there wasn't any other economy up in those mountains. Chapo grew up watching his father beat his mother, working the fields as a kid, barely getting any education. He was selling oranges on the street by age 6. But here's what people don't understand about Sinaloa. Poverty up there breeds a specific type of ambition. When your only options are farming or trafficking, and farming keeps you starving, the choice gets made for you. By his teens, Chapo was already moving marijuana with older traffickers. He was short, that's where the nickname Chapo comes from, meaning shorty. But he had something more dangerous than size. He had intelligence, ruthlessness, and an understanding of logistics that would eventually build an empire. The man who really shaped Chapo's rise was Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, known as El Padrino, the Godfather. Felix Gallardo controlled the Guadalajara cartel in the 1980s, basically the original Mexican drug trafficking organization that started the whole modern cartel system. Chapo worked his way up, proving himself as someone who could move product efficiently, who understood the importance of tunnels and bribery, who was willing to do whatever it took. When Felix Gallardo got arrested in 1989 and the Guadalajara cartel fragmented, Chapo helped form the Sinaloa cartel. But he didn't become the leader immediately. He spent the early 1990s building infrastructure, literally. He pioneered the tunnel system under the US-Mexico border, creating underground railways that could move tons of cocaine, marijuana, and heroin without detection. He developed relationships with Colombian cartels who needed someone to move their product into the United States. He built a distribution network that reached every major American city. By the mid-1990s, Chapo was one of the most powerful traffickers in Mexico. Not the most powerful yet. He still had competition, still had rivals, but he was moving massive quantities of drugs and generating hundreds of millions of dollars annually. Then came his first major arrest in 1993 in Guatemala. Mexican authorities threw him in Puente Grande maximum security prison. And here's where the Chapo legend really starts. Because prison didn't stop him at all. He kept running his empire from inside, bribing guards, living in luxury, ordering hits on rivals. The prison was supposed to be maximum security, In reality, Chapo controlled it like he controlled everything else. On January 19, 2001, El Chapo escaped Puente Grande in a laundry cart. At least that's the official story. The real story is that he walked out the front door after paying off basically the entire prison staff. Guards literally stood aside and let him leave. It was one of the most embarrassing moments in Mexican law enforcement history, and it announced to the world that El Chapo was untouchable. For the next 13 years, 2001 to 2014, Chapo became a ghost, the most wanted man in Mexico, with a $5 million bounty on his head, living in safe houses across Sinaloa, moving every few days, protected by a network of loyalists who would die before giving him up. During this time, the Sinaloa cartel became the most powerful criminal organization in the Western Hemisphere. They controlled drug routes from South America to Canada, operated in over 50 countries, and generated somewhere between $3 billion to $10 billion annually, depending on whose estimates you believe. This is the empire Chapo built. This is the power his family was born into. And this is what makes what happened next so devastating, because when you're that high up, the fall is brutal. Now let's talk about what life was like for the Guzman family when Chapo was at the peak of his power, because understanding this is essential to understanding why they eventually fled. El Chapo had multiple wives and relationships throughout his life. His first wife, Alejandrina Maria Salazar Hernandez, gave him several children including Ivan Archivaldo and Jesus Alfredo, the sons who would eventually take over parts of the cartel. His second wife was Griselda Lopez Perez, mother to more of his children. He had relationships with other women, fathered more kids. The exact number of El Chapo's children is disputed. Estimates range from 10 to 15. But what matters is that he built a dynasty. Then in 2007, when Chapo was 50 years old and on the run from authorities, he met Emma Coronel Aispuro. She was 17 years old, the daughter of a cattle rancher with cartel connections. They met at a party, and according to reports, Chapo was immediately obsessed. They got married in 2007 when Emma was 18, in a ceremony that supposedly cost over $100,000, with musicians flown in and security surrounding the whole event. Emma became Chapo's public face in a way his previous wives never were. She was young, beautiful, and unlike the wives who stayed hidden in the mountains, Emma had ambitions. She wanted to be seen, and Chapo gave her that life. When Emma got pregnant in 2011, here's what Chapo did. He sent her to California to give birth. Not Mexico, the United States, specifically Lancaster, California, north of Los Angeles. And on August 15, 2011, Emma gave birth to twin daughters, Maria Joaquina and Amali Guadalupe Guzman Coronel. Why California? Because those girls were born U.S. citizens. Chapo, who couldn't set foot in the United States without being arrested immediately, made sure his youngest children would have American passports. He was thinking ahead, setting up an escape route for his bloodline, even while he was running the most powerful cartel in the world. Back in Mexico, the Guzman family lived like royalty. Not publicly flashy royalty, Chapo knew better than that, but they had money beyond imagination. Multiple properties across Sinaloa and other states, armed guards everywhere. The ability to buy anything, bribe anyone, go anywhere they wanted in regions the cartel controlled. Emma would post on social media showing glimpses of this life: designer clothes, expensive jewelry, luxury cars. Nothing too obvious, but enough to show she was living well. The twins grew up in this world, protected by layers of security, surrounded by wealth that came from their father's empire. Chapo's older sons, Ivan, Alfredo, Ovidio, and Joaquin, known collectively as Los Chapitos, were being groomed to take over the business. They lived flashy lifestyles, posting on social media about their cars and jewelry and parties. They were young narco royalty, and they acted like it. But here's what you gotta understand about that life. It's built on sand. The higher you rise in the cartel world, the more enemies you make. Rival cartels who want your territory, the government who wants to arrest you for political points, members of your own organization who might betray you, and your own family members who might challenge your power. The Guzman family was living on borrowed time, and everybody knew it except maybe them. February 22, 2014, Mazatlan, Sinaloa. Mexican Marines working with U.S. intelligence raided a beachfront condo in the early morning hours. They breached the door and found El Chapo in bed with Emma. No shootout. No dramatic escape through a tunnel. Just the most wanted man in Mexico getting arrested in his pajamas. This was Chapo's second capture. Remember, he'd escaped from Puente Grande in 2001. But this time, the Twainki Tragedia Bisiesti. Authorities knew they couldn't let him escape again. They moved him to Altiplano Maximum Security Prison near Mexico City, supposedly the most secure facility in the country. For Emma and the twins, everything changed instantly. Their protection evaporated. The man who controlled their entire world was locked up. And even though Chapo's organization kept running under his son's leadership, the sense of invincibility was gone. Then, on July 11, 2015, just 16 months after his capture, El Chapo did it again. He escaped from Altiplano through a tunnel his people had built right into his cell. A mile-long tunnel, equipped with lighting and ventilation, ending in a hole behind his shower. It was the most sophisticated prison break in Mexican history. For 6 months, Chapo was free again. And during those 6 months, the Mexican government was absolutely humiliated. International media coverage was brutal. The United States was demanding extradition, and everyone knew that if he got caught again, Mexico wouldn't be able to hold him. January 8, 2016, Mexican Marines tracked Chapo to Los Mochis, Sinaloa. They raided a safe house at 4:30 in the morning. This time, there was a shootout. 5 of Chapo's gunmen were killed, 1 Marine wounded. Chapo escaped through a tunnel, of course, but he didn't get far. They caught him on the outskirts of town trying to steal a car. This time, extradition to the United States happened fast. On January 19, 2017, exactly 16 years after his first escape from Puente Grande, El Chapo was put on a plane to New York. He would never see Mexico again. The trial in Brooklyn Federal Court was one of the most significant criminal trials in American history. For 3 months, from November 2018 to February 2019, prosecutors laid out the entire scope of the Sinaloa cartel's operations. Witnesses testified about murders Chapo ordered, drug shipments he coordinated, the billions of dollars his organization generated. The evidence was overwhelming. On February 12, 2019, the jury convicted El Chapo on all 10 counts, including continuing criminal enterprise, drug trafficking, conspiracy to commit murder, and firearms charges. On July 17, 2019, Judge Brian Cogan sentenced Joaquin El Chapo Guzman to life in prison plus 30 years. They sent him to ADX Florence in Colorado, the Supermax prison known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies, where the most dangerous criminals in America are held in 23-hour-a-day solitary confinement. El Chapo would never escape again. He would die in that cell, and his family had to figure out how to survive without him. So here's the question everyone asks. Why did El Chapo's family flee to the United States? Why would they run to the country that arrested their father and locked him up for life? The answer is survival. Let me break down why. First, the government pressure in Mexico became unbearable. After El Chapo's extradition, Mexican authorities wanted to prove they were serious about fighting cartels. That meant going after his family. His sons were facing arrest warrants. His associates were getting picked up. Properties were being seized. The protection that came from being El Chapo's family evaporated because El Chapo couldn't protect them from a Colorado prison cell. Second, and this is crucial, rival cartels wanted revenge. The Jalisco New Generation Cartel, the Beltran Leyva organization, the Tijuana cartel, all of them saw Chapo's fall as an opportunity. They started moving into Sinaloa cartel territory, and they targeted the Guzman family specifically. Assassination attempts increased. Threats became constant. Being El Chapo's relative went from being protection to being a death sentence. Third, internal cartel politics got dangerous. When a leader like Chapo goes down, everyone fights for control. Los Chapitos tried to take over, but older cartel members didn't necessarily respect them. Power struggles turned violent. People who'd worked for Chapo for decades suddenly had to choose sides. The family couldn't trust anyone. Emma Coronel saw this coming. Remember, those twin daughters had U.S. citizenship from birth. Emma herself was a U.S. citizen. She'd been born in California too. So when things got dangerous in Mexico, she had an exit strategy. She could take her daughters and cross the border legally. No tunnels needed, no coyotes, just American passports. And that's exactly what she did. While El Chapo was locked up in New York awaiting trial, Emma moved to the United States with the twins. She attended every day of Chapo's trial, sitting in the courtroom dressed in designer clothes, playing the loyal wife for the cameras. But behind the scenes, she was setting up a life in America for her and her daughters. Here's where it gets complicated. On February 22, 2021, Emma herself got arrested at Dulles International Airport in Virginia. Federal agents charged her with conspiracy to distribute drugs and helping El Chapo escape from Puente Grande prison back in 2001. She was 20 years old when that escape happened, and prosecutors claimed she was a key participant. Emma pleaded guilty. On November 30th, 2021, a federal judge sentenced her to 3 years in prison. Not a long sentence considering the charges, but it meant the twins, now 10 years old, had to live without either parent. Their father was locked up for life in Colorado, their mother in a federal facility, and they were American citizens living somewhere in the U.S. under somebody's care. Emma got released in September 2023 after serving about 2 years, getting credit for time served and good behavior. And now she's somewhere in the United States raising those twin daughters in complete privacy. No social media, no interviews, no public appearances. They're ghosts. But here's what people don't talk about enough. Other family members fled too or tried to. Some of Chapo's relatives applied for asylum or visas using the danger in Mexico as justification. Some crossed illegally and disappeared into immigrant communities. The entire Guzman network in Mexico fractured, and pieces of it ended up scattered across the American Southwest. Why the U.S.? Because despite everything, it's safer. The Mexican government can arrest you. Rival cartels can kill you. Your own organization can betray you. But in the United States, if you keep your head down, stay out of trouble, don't attract attention, you can disappear. The U.S. has millions of immigrants from Mexico. Nobody's checking if you're related to a drug lord unless you give them reason to. For Emma and the twins specifically, there's another factor: money. If there's hidden cartel money anywhere, it's easier to access it from the U.S. than from Mexico, where the government might be watching. Whether that money exists is the billion-dollar question, which brings us to the next part of this story. So how is El Chapo's family living in the United States right now in 2026? That's what everyone wants to know, because the answer tells us whether they escaped with a fortune or just their lives. Let's start with Emma and the twins. They're living somewhere in the United States. Exactly where is unknown and probably intentional. Emma served her time, paid her debt to society according to U.S. law, and now she's a free woman with custody of her daughters, who are about 14 or 15 years old now. Here's what we know for certain. Someone is paying their bills. They have housing, they have food. The girls are presumably in school or being homeschooled. They have legal representation that handled Emma's case. That all costs money. Where's that money coming from? The official answer is, we don't know. Emma hasn't declared bankruptcy. She hasn't been on government assistance that we know of. She's supporting 2 teenagers somehow. But U.S. authorities seized billions in assets connected to El Chapo's drug empire. Bank accounts, properties, businesses. If they could prove it came from cartel money, they took it. However, and this is important, the Sinaloa cartel operated for decades. They laundered money through thousands of businesses, shell companies, and international accounts. They had money hidden in ways that might never be traced. If Chapo was smart, and he was, he would have set aside money in places the government couldn't find. Trust funds in the twins' names established years ago, properties bought through layers of companies, cash buried in locations only family knows about. Could Emma have access to some of that? Absolutely possible. Could the twins inherit money when they turn 18 or 21? Also possible. But it's equally possible that everything got seized, and they're living off whatever Emma earned legitimately, or support from extended family, or money from Chapo's sons who are still operating. The lifestyle they're living now is nothing like the lifestyle in Mexico when Chapo was free. No armed guards, no designer clothes posted on Instagram, no luxury cars. They're keeping their heads down, staying invisible, trying to give those girls as normal a life as possible, given that their father is the most famous drug lord of the century. Emma is only 35 years old now. She's young. She served her time. She could theoretically rebuild a life, but she'll forever be known as El Chapo's wife. That's not something you escape. Every job application, every background check, every new person she meets, that association follows her. For the twins, it's even more complicated. They're teenagers growing up knowing their father is in prison for life, their mother did time, their half-brothers are wanted criminals, and their last name is infamous worldwide. Imagine trying to make friends, trying to date, trying to apply to colleges with that background. Do they use their real names? Do they try to hide who they are? How do you build a normal identity when your family history is international news? And there's another question nobody can answer. Are they in danger? Rival cartels have long memories. If someone wanted revenge on the Guzman family, those girls are targets. That's probably part of why their location is kept secret. That's probably why they maintain zero public presence. The US government isn't providing them witness protection. They're not witnesses and didn't cooperate with authorities. But they're probably being careful, moving if necessary, staying away from anywhere with large Mexican immigrant populations where someone might recognize them. This is exile, not the glamorous kind. The kind where you traded everything you had for survival, and you're living quiet and anonymous because that's the only way to stay safe. While Emma and the twins fled to the United States, El Chapo's sons stayed in Mexico and tried to hold on to what was left of the empire. And their story shows exactly why fleeing was the smart choice. Los Chapitos, Ivan Archibaldo Guzman Salazar, Jesus Alfredo Guzman Salazar, Ovidio Guzman Lopez, and Joaquin Guzman Lopez took control of their father's faction of the Sinaloa cartel, but they inherited a war. These guys didn't have their father's intelligence or experience. They were in their 20s and 30s, used to luxury and Instagram flexing, not used to the strategic thinking that built the cartel, and they immediately made enemies. First, they beefed with Ismael El Mayo Zambada. El Mencho, CJNG, was rising fast, ultra-violent, taking territory everywhere. They wanted Sinaloa's routes, and they were willing to kill anyone in their way. Los Chapitos got into brutal battles with CJNG that turned entire regions of Mexico into war zones. Third, the Mexican government kept hunting them. All 4 brothers have arrest warrants. All 4 are wanted by the United States on drug trafficking charges with potential life sentences. They can't travel. They can't operate openly. They're constantly moving between safe houses, just like their father was. On October 17, 2019, Mexican security forces captured Ovidio Guzman in Culiacan, Sinaloa. What happened next was insane. The cartel fought back. Hundreds of gunmen blocked roads, attacked police, set vehicles on fire throughout the city. They brought out .50 caliber machine guns. They took hostages, including soldiers' families. The Mexican government, and I'm not making this up, decided to release Ovidio to stop the violence. They literally caught him and let him go because the cartel overpowered them. That showed Los Chapitos still had power, but it also showed they were willing to turn Mexican cities into battlegrounds, which made them even bigger targets. Then on January 5, 2023, Mexican Marines captured Ovidio again, this time in a massive operation. The cartel responded with more violence, burning vehicles, shooting up the Culiacan airport, blocking roads. But this time, the government didn't back down. 29 people died in the fighting, and Ovidio stayed captured. On September 15, 2023, Mexico extradited Ovidio to the United States. He's currently in U.S. custody in Chicago facing drug trafficking charges that could put him away for life, just like his father. At 33 years old, he's probably never getting out. The other brothers are still in Mexico as of 2026, still running operations, still wanted, still fighting wars on multiple fronts. Ivan and Alfredo are the oldest and most experienced, but even they don't have the strategic genius their father had. Joaquin is the youngest and keeps a lower profile. They're living in hiding, constantly moving, surrounded by gunmen, knowing that every day could be their last free day. Mexican authorities want them. American authorities want them. CJNG wants them dead. Even their own cartel members might betray them for the right price. This is what staying in Mexico meant. Constant war, constant danger, no legitimate life possible. They chose to stay and fight for the empire. Emma chose to flee and protect her daughters. Both choices make sense, but only one leads to survival. Here's the brutal reality Los Chapitos are facing. The Sinaloa cartel is fractured. El Mayo's faction operates separately. Los Chapitos' faction is under constant attack. The organization that once controlled drug trafficking across entire regions of Mexico is now just one cartel among many, fighting for scraps. And one by one, they're falling. Ovidio's in U.S. custody. The others will eventually get caught or killed. That's just how this story always ends. They can't run to the United States like their stepmother did because they're actively wanted there. They can't negotiate their way out because they've made too many enemies. Their only option is to keep fighting until they can't anymore. That's the price of staying. That's why the rest of the family fled. The question everyone really wants answered: did El Chapo's family escape with billions in hidden money? Or are they basically broke fugitives starting over? The truth is probably somewhere in between, and here's why. At his peak, El Chapo's organization generated between $3 billion and $10 billion annually, according to various estimates. Over 30 years of operation, even accounting for expenses and bribes and everything else, we're talking about tens of billions of dollars moving through the Sinaloa cartel. Where did all that money go? Some of it got seized. U.S. and Mexican authorities have confiscated billions in cartel assets over the years. Bank accounts, properties, businesses, vehicles. If they could prove it was bought with drug money, they took it. When Chapo got sentenced, the U.S. government also hit him with a forfeiture order for $12.6 billion. That's billion with a B. Whether they'll ever collect that is another question, but it shows the scale of money involved. Some of it got spent. Running a cartel is expensive. You're paying thousands of people. You're bribing government officials. You're buying weapons. You're funding operations. You're replacing product that gets seized. You're paying for lawyers. The money that comes in doesn't just sit in a vault, but some of it. And this is what matters for the family. Some of it got hidden. Money laundered through legitimate businesses. Cash buried in locations only trusted people know. Accounts in foreign banks under shell company names. Properties bought through layers of ownership that can't be traced. Trust funds established for children years ago before the heat came down. El Chapo was planning for his empire to last generations. He wasn't stupid. He knew that governments seize assets, that cartels collapse, that empires fall, so he would have protected his family's future. The question is how much he protected and whether his family can access it. For Emma and the twins, if there's money, it's probably in trust funds or accounts they can't touch yet. Maybe when the twins turn 18 or 21, maybe when enough time has passed that authorities aren't watching as closely, or maybe it's accessible now through intermediaries, through lawyers, through family members who know how to move money without triggering investigations. For Los Chapitos still operating in Mexico, they have access to current cartel income. They're still moving drugs, still generating revenue. Not at the level their father did, and not with the same stability. But they're not broke. That's how they fund their operations, pay their gunmen, maintain their lifestyle. The reality is this. The Guzman family went from having access to one of the largest criminal fortunes in history to having whatever they managed to hide before everything collapsed. Emma's not posting designer clothes anymore. The twins aren't living in mansions. Los Chapitos are funding wars, not luxuries. Are they billionaires? Probably not. At least, not in accessible wealth. Are they broke? Definitely not. There's too much money that went through that organization for none of it to have been protected. They're somewhere in the middle, living off whatever was hidden away, whatever can be accessed without getting caught, whatever the government hasn't found yet. And here's the thing, they'll never tell. If Emma has access to millions, she's not declaring it. If the twins have trust funds waiting, they're not talking about it. If there's money buried somewhere, nobody's making a map. The Guzman family learned the most important lesson in the cartel world. You survive by staying silent and invisible. So what's the legacy of El Chapo's bloodline? A drug empire that spanned continents, generated billions, corrupted governments, and changed the entire drug trade. All of it ending with family members scattered across 2 countries, some in prison, some in hiding. None of them living the life they had when Chapo was free. The twin daughters are American teenagers now, growing up knowing their father is locked in a Colorado Supermax forever, trying to build something resembling a normal life. They'll never have the privilege of anonymity. Their last name guarantees that, but they have a chance at a future that doesn't involve cartels, or violence, or prison. That's more than a lot of El Chapo's family can say. Emma Coronel is in her mid-30s, a convicted felon, a former beauty queen, turned cartel wife, turned federal prisoner turned single mother, in exile. She made choices that put her in prison. She also made choices that got her daughters to safety. History will judge which mattered more. Los Chapitos are fighting a war they probably can't win. Ovidio's already in U.S. custody facing life. The others are targets of every major cartel in Mexico, every law enforcement agency in North America, and probably some of their own organization. They chose to stay and fight for the empire. That choice will probably kill them, or land them in prison next to their father. The Sinaloa cartel still exists, but it's not what it was. It's fractured, weakened, fighting on multiple fronts. El Mayo Zambada is old and might not be running things much longer. Los Chapitos can't hold it together. CJNG is taking territory. The empire El Chapo built is crumbling, and his bloodline can't stop it. This is how it ends for every cartel dynasty eventually. The first generation builds the empire through ruthlessness and intelligence. The second generation tries to maintain it, but doesn't have the same skills. The third generation either escapes the life or dies in it. The Guzman family is following that pattern exactly. Emma fled to America to save her daughters from that cycle. She gave up the wealth, the power, the lifestyle, everything, for the chance that those girls could grow up without becoming the next generation of cartel royalty or cartel victims. That's the smartest decision anyone in that family made. The sons who stayed in Mexico chose differently. They wanted the power, the respect, the empire. They're paying for it with their freedom or their lives. And El Chapo himself? He's in a 7 by 12-foot cell in Colorado, in solitary confinement 23 hours a day, never seeing the sun, never breathing fresh air, slowly going insane in the most secure prison in America. He built an empire. He became a legend. He lived like a king, and he'll die alone in a concrete box. That's the real end of the bloodline. Not in dramatic shootouts or betrayals, but in scattered exile. Family members living quiet, desperate lives in American suburbs. Sons fighting losing wars in Mexican mountains. A patriarch slowly losing his mind in solitary confinement. A criminal dynasty that once controlled billions reduced to people just trying to survive. The Guzman name used to mean power. Now it means target. Used to mean wealth. Now it means surveillance. Used to mean invincibility. Now it means running for your life. That's why El Chapo's family fled to the USA. Not because they wanted to, because staying in Mexico meant death. And America, even with all its prison cells and seizures and prosecutions, at least offered the possibility of survival. The empire is dead. The bloodline is scattered. And the most powerful narco family in modern history ended up like everyone who plays this game, either locked in cages or running for their lives, with nothing but regrets and broken dreams to show for all those billions. That's the truth behind the Exodus. That's the reality behind the headlines. And that's what happens when you build a kingdom on blood and cocaine. Eventually, the whole thing collapses, and your children pay the price.